It was just another ordinary day in Brookside High, or so it seemed. The morning sun filtered through the large glass windows of the school hallway, casting streaks of light on the polished floors. Students moved about, chattering, laughing, and some, like Emma, simply trying to blend in. Emma wasn't the type to draw attention to herself. Her clothes were simple, worn jeans, an oversized sweater, and scuffed sneakers that had seen better days. She kept her head down, her dark hair falling over her face like a protective curtain. But even in her silence, Emma wasn't invisible. She was the target of constant mockery by a group of classmates who thrived on pointing out her perceived shortcomings. Today, it was the state of her shoes. "Hey, Emma," called out Lisa, the self-proclaimed queen of the school, her voice dripping with mockery. "Do your shoes have their own vintage charm, or is it just poverty chic?" A ripple of laughter echoed through the hallway as her friends joined in, high-fiving one another. Emma didn't respond. She never did. She clutched her backpack tighter, willing herself to disappear. But if anyone had looked closer, beyond the meek exterior, they might have seen a flicker of something else in her eyes, an unyielding strength she kept well hidden. What none of them knew was that Emma's life wasn't as simple as her appearance suggested. Beneath the modest clothing and quiet demeanor lay a secret that could shake the foundations of their assumptions. Emma was far from the ordinary girl they thought she was. She was, in fact, an heiress to one of the largest fortunes in the country, a legacy she had chosen to keep hidden. It wasn't because she was ashamed of her wealth. Emma's life had taught her that money, while powerful, came with its own burdens. Growing up surrounded by luxury hadn't shielded her from the pain of loss or the longing for genuine connections. Her parents, who had built an empire from scratch, had always emphasized humility and the value of understanding others. When tragedy struck 2 years ago and Emma lost them in a car accident, their lessons became her guiding light. She had decided to step away from the glittering world she once knew, trading it for a life of quiet anonymity. But anonymity came at a cost. The very shield Emma had built to protect herself was the reason she was now the butt of cruel jokes. And while she tried to let the comments roll off her back, today's taunts cut a little deeper. It wasn't the words themselves. It was the ease with which people judged without knowing the full story. As the laughter around her continued, Emma walked to her locker, her hands trembling slightly. She opened it and stared at the neatly arranged books inside. Among them was a worn leather notebook, the only physical reminder of her old life. Inside its pages were letters from her parents, pieces of advice scribbled down during family dinners, and sketches of the dreams they had for her future. It was her anchor, the thing that kept her grounded in moments like these. Just as she was about to close the locker, a sharp voice interrupted her thoughts. "Still pretending to be invisible, huh?" It was Jake, Lisa's partner in crime, leaning casually against the lockers beside hers. His smirk was as smug as ever, his tone laced with the confidence of someone who believed he was untouchable. Emma ignored him, focusing on the books she was arranging in her backpack. But Jake wasn't one to be brushed off easily. "You know, people like you should be grateful we even notice you," he sneered. "Without us, you'd be nothing." The words hung in the air, sharp and heavy. Emma wanted to lash out, to tell him he didn't know the first thing about her or what she'd been through. But she knew it wouldn't change anything. People like Jake thrived on reactions, and she wasn't about to give him the satisfaction. What Jake and the others didn't realize was that their cruelty wasn't breaking Emma. It was building her resolve. Each insult, each snide remark, was a reminder of why she had chosen this path. It wasn't just about living differently. It was about proving to herself that she could rise above the superficiality that often came with wealth. As the bell rang, signaling the start of the next class, Emma slung her backpack over her shoulder and walked away, her head held just a little higher. The day wasn't over, and she knew the taunts would continue. But something within her whispered that the time to reveal her true self was drawing closer. And when that moment came, it wouldn't just be a revelation. It would be a reckoning. As the day unfolded, Emma kept to herself, moving through the hallways like a shadow. The school was bustling, but she felt detached from the noise and chaos. Every glance, every whisper seemed aimed at her, though she knew most of it was in her head. Still, the reality of being an outsider weighed heavily, even for someone as resilient as Emma. Lunch break came, and she found her usual spot under the big oak tree at the far end of the school grounds. It was a place no one else cared for, too far from the cafeteria, and too quiet for the cliques who preferred to show off. Emma didn't mind. It gave her time to think, to breathe. She pulled out the old notebook again, flipping through its pages until she landed on a sketch of her family estate, a sprawling mansion surrounded by gardens and a lake. Her mother had drawn it years ago, with little notes about the beauty of home. It felt like a world away now, a place she wasn't sure she belonged to anymore. Emma's solitude didn't go unnoticed, though. From the cafeteria windows, Lisa and her crew watched. Their interest piqued. "She's such a loner," Lisa said, rolling her eyes. "Does she even have friends?" "Nope," Jake replied with a smirk. "But hey, maybe she talks to squirrels or something. She's always out there by herself." The group burst into laughter, their mocking voices carrying through the air. But one person at the table wasn't laughing. Noah, one of Lisa's so-called friends, watched Emma with a different expression. He wasn't the type to join in the bullying, but he rarely spoke up against it either. Something about Emma intrigued him, though her quiet strength, the way she carried herself despite everything. He couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to her than anyone realized. After lunch, Emma returned to class, bracing herself for another round of whispers and stares. But as the teacher droned on about history, her thoughts drifted. She wasn't thinking about the lesson or even about the bullies. Her mind was on the letter she'd received a week ago, one that had been sitting in her backpack ever since. It was from her family's lawyer, reminding her of her upcoming birthday and the responsibilities that came with it. In just 2 weeks, Emma would turn 18. And with that milestone came full access to her inheritance, a vast fortune, properties around the world, and a seat on the board of her parents' company. It was everything anyone could dream of, yet it felt like a heavy weight on her shoulders. She didn't want the money or the power. She just wanted to figure out who she was without it. But she also knew she couldn't run from it forever. Later that afternoon, as she walked home, Emma's thoughts were interrupted by the sound of footsteps behind her. She turned to see Noah jogging to catch up. "Hey," he said, slightly out of breath. Emma blinked, surprised. "Hi." Noah scratched the back of his neck, looking a little nervous. I noticed you sitting by the tree at lunch. Thought maybe you'd like some company tomorrow." Emma stared at him, unsure of his intentions. Was this some kind of prank? But Noah's expression seemed genuine, and for the first time in a long time, someone was looking at her without judgment or mockery. "I'll think about it," she replied cautiously, her voice soft. Noah nodded, offering a small smile before walking away. Emma watched him go, her thoughts a jumble. She wasn't used to kindness, especially from someone in Lisa's circle. It made her wonder what his angle was, or if he even had one. The days passed, and the tension in Emma's life seemed to grow. The bullying didn't stop, but she found herself holding on to the glimmer of hope that maybe not everyone was the same. Noah started sitting near her during lunch, keeping the conversation light and never pushing her to open up. He seemed different, and though Emma was still wary, she couldn't deny that his presence was a welcome change. But Lisa didn't like it. She noticed the way Noah had started pulling away from the group, his attention focused elsewhere. It made her furious, and she decided it was time to put Emma in her place once and for all. One afternoon, as Emma packed up her books after class, Lisa cornered her near the lockers, her arms crossed and a smug expression on her face. "So you think you're special now, huh? Just because Noah's talking to you?" she sneered. Emma didn't respond, but Lisa wasn't done. "Let me give you a little advice, Emma. People like you don't belong here. You're just a nobody, and you'll always be a nobody." For a moment, Emma felt the familiar sting of Lisa's words. But then something inside her shifted. She was tired of hiding, tired of pretending. Maybe it was time to show them who she really was, not to prove anything, but to remind herself that she didn't have to live in fear. As Lisa turned to walk away, Emma's voice stopped her. "You don't know anything about me," she said, her tone calm but firm. Lisa froze, clearly not expecting a response. She turned back, raising an eyebrow. "Oh, really? And what's there to know?" Emma didn't answer. She didn't need to, not yet. But the look in her eyes said enough. Something big was coming, and for the first time, Lisa felt a flicker of uncertainty. The stage was set, and the tension was palpable. Emma's secret was on the verge of being revealed, and when it was, nothing would ever be the same again. Emma walked home that day with her heart racing. She had stood up to Lisa, not in a dramatic way, but enough to make her point. For the first time in a long while, she didn't feel powerless. The moment replayed in her mind, filling her with a mix of fear and exhilaration. She wasn't sure what would come next, but she knew she couldn't go back to being the quiet girl everyone overlooked. That night, Emma sat at her desk, the old leather notebook open in front of her. She traced her fingers over a photograph taped to one of the pages. A picture of her family taken years ago, standing in front of their estate. Her parents had always told her to be true to herself, no matter what. It was time to honor that. The next morning, Emma arrived at school with a quiet determination. She wasn't sure how things would unfold, but she was ready for whatever came her way. As she walked through the halls, she noticed the usual stares and whispers. But this time, they didn't bother her. She wasn't here to prove anything to anyone. She was here for herself. By lunchtime, the tension was thick. Lisa and her group sat at their usual table, laughing and gossiping. Emma could feel their eyes on her, but she ignored them. Instead, she walked straight to the center of the cafeteria and climbed onto one of the tables. The room fell silent as everyone turned to look at her, curiosity and confusion etched on their faces. "I have something to say," Emma began, her voice steady but loud enough to carry across the room. "For a long time, I've let people make assumptions about me. I've let them think I'm less than them because of how I look or where I sit during lunch. But today, I'm done hiding." The cafeteria buzzed with whispers, but Emma pressed on. "The truth is, you don't know me. None of you do. You see this," she gestured to her simple clothes and worn sneakers, "and you think you have me all figured out. But the truth is, I'm not what you think. I'm Emma Crawford, heiress to the Crawford fortune." The room erupted into shocked murmurs. Lisa's smug expression faltered, her confidence shaken. "You're lying," she scoffed, though her voice lacked its usual edge. Emma reached into her bag and pulled out a small envelope, holding it up for everyone to see. "This is a letter from my family's lawyer. It confirms everything. But you know what? None of it matters. I'm not telling you this to impress you or make you like me. I'm telling you because I'm done letting people like Lisa define my worth." The room was silent now, everyone hanging on her every word. Emma took a deep breath, her gaze sweeping across the crowd. We all have stories, struggles, and things we're dealing with that no one else sees. So maybe it's time we stop judging people based on appearances and start treating each other with a little more kindness. With that, Emma climbed down from the table and walked out of the cafeteria, leaving the stunned crowd behind. She didn't need their applause or approval. For the first time in years, she felt free. Free to be herself, free from the fear of judgment. Over the next few weeks, things began to change. Some people apologized for the way they had treated Emma, while others kept their distance, unsure of how to approach her. Lisa tried to hold on to her reputation, but her influence waned as people started to see through her facade. Noah continued to sit with Emma under the oak tree, their conversations growing deeper and more meaningful. He'd admired her courage and the way she had handled everything with grace. For Emma, Noah was a reminder that genuine connections were worth more than anything money could buy. In the end, Emma didn't need to reclaim her place in the world of wealth and privilege. She had found something far more valuable, a sense of self-worth that no one could take away. And as she sat under the oak tree one afternoon, the sun warm on her face, she realized she had finally found her place. It wasn't defined by money or status, but by the strength to be herself, no matter what.